Okay, ladies and gentlemen out there in YouTube land, thank you so much for joining me tonight. My name is Matt Yancic, and I am the founder and head game master here at Manufactured Myth and Ledger Domain. And tonight I'm bringing you the face of another role player. So we have with us tonight none other than Dan Patterson. And you may be thinking to yourself, are you saying Dan Patterson, the famous technology reporter from CBS News? That's right. That's right. Other channels, they're just giving you creators. They're just giving you like these minor celebrities. Not here on MML. We're bringing you none other than a CBS News reporter. So Dan started reporting with college radio, and he later went on to podcasting and streaming, but he rapidly rose in the ranks, alliteration intended, to go on to his current gig as no less than producing, writing, and actually appearing on air as a technology reporter and commentator for CBS News. I never thought I'd say this, but a guest on my program, Dan, is also a member of the UN Correspondents Association. I had no idea that I would ever be able to say something like that on my program. He has reported on the World Economic Forum. He has reported on presidential primaries, the Global Cybersecurity Summit, Black Hat and CES. He has had guests all the way from Willie Nelson and Chuck D to Fredrick Brennan and Kevin Mitnick. I wrote a letter to Kevin Mitnick when I was like in college because I felt bad for him when he was in prison. But I just can't believe this. And as if that weren't enough, he has also won a couple of awards. The Frederick Donald Robinson Award for Investigative Journalism, as well as the Silver Telly Award as well. But you're probably thinking, okay, that's cool. That's all right. But why is he really here? He's here because recently, in recent months, he's rocketed to fame among the RPG community for the famous background that you see now in his background. And now, I'm so sorry, I'm not here to give a soliloquy, even though it seems like I am. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. How's it going?
Well, Matt, it's great to be with you, and great to be talking about RPGs. I I think that what you do, especially as a teacher and here as a storyteller, is incredibly important. You're connecting with people in really authentic and personal ways, and um, as a reporter, what I try to do is connect with people in personal ways. I don't know that I'm always successful at it, but I think that gaming and especially RPGs are. I mean, it's so great to see them flourish now, but there's such a great way to communicate ideas that are abstract or sometimes really challenging and human. So I appreciate being on your show and being able to talk about something that is um, unique and shared with this cool community.
It's really cool to have you on here. Like it's so I don't know if you saw the tweets, but I think I was like laying in bed on like a Saturday morning or something, and I picked up my phone like you always do, and I'm like looking at through Twitter, and there's like this kind of blurry shot of you with the background, the famous background seen all around the RPG community. And I saw it and I'm like, oh my God, it's had like 1,000 retweets and it's got like thousands of comments on it, and people are like doing forensic studies of what's going on in your background. And I have to say, the overwhelming like response that I saw was just this sort of like feeling that he's one of us, and it's nice to see a respectable and member of society that's actually also happens to be a gamer. Um, so tell us, Dan, I as a child, were you an avid gamer, or is this something that sort of recently you've come into, or how did that happen?
I'm pretty. I mean, I'm genuinely excited to see the state of not just RPGs, but board gaming and I mean, video games for sure, but really in real life gaming is fantastic. I was look, I this is a cliche, but I was a nerd far before being a nerd was cool, in the 80s and 90s. And my friends who I still game with, like all of us were playing. I think we probably jumped in on D&D 2.5. I mean, video games. I'm sorry, AD&D second edition. I'm thinking of we all started the second campaign in 3.5. Anyway, we started gaming. A lot of us probably started with Dungeons and Dragons before we really understood the concepts behind the mechanics. We were pretty young, probably 8 to 12. And the culture of gaming was, of course, as it is now, it was bigger than just gaming. I think that we were also introduced and spent a lot of time with comic book nerds, and I suspect that this fueled a very early desire to tell and to share stories. But anyway, so I digress a little bit. But no, I've been a gamer for a long time.
Do you think, well, when you say it sort of sent you in that direction, are you talking about you had ideas early on that you wanted to get into reporting, or did you want to tell stories in other ways, or was it just simply communicating, like talking with others and that sort of thing?
I think looking back, probably there was a communal and social experience that was intertwined with storytelling, and probably a little bit of the nerding out over the mechanics. And I think that it's probably a very similar, there are similar themes that are attractive today, right? There are community and social dynamics, but there are definitely storytelling and creative dynamics that are a part of RPGs that are always pretty fascinating. And I mean, who can't relate to spending hours and hours going over the mechanics in RPG books? And I think that why a lot of the books that have stuck with me over the years are old manuals, because the mechanics are always a ton of fun to not just read fresh, but to revisit.
You know what's interesting about that though, when you say this, it makes me think here, and maybe I'm making a false connection here, but I mean, is it fair to say you're a technology reporter, or are you a reporter? Or how would you sort of label yourself if you were going to do that? Because the idea of being into the mechanics kind of feels like it kind of lines up with the idea of being into technology and perhaps the mechanics of that, or am I just drawing a weird, silly conclusion?
No, you're drawing a great conclusion, or a pretty accurate conclusion. I mean, look, I'm a reporter. Like a lot of reporters, you wear a lot of different hats, which, being a producer and a writer as well. And that's kind of, if you think about the role of a game master, it's essentially the same as a producer, right? Not only are you responsible for the thing happening, in this case, a game, or it could be a video package or a story, but it's your responsibility. If you don't do the work,
Mm.
like set up the mechanics, coordinate with your players,
Hmm.
make sure that you have the materials that you need, make sure that you have a good timeline set out, make sure that you have a good narrative structure,
Hmm.
all of those same things. I mean, you could be designing a game, or you could be producing a video package. So I think that probably that is one reason the mechanics are attractive.
And at the same time, during that same kind of time period, were you also into technology, or was
Mm.
that something that came later as well? Or is this kind of
I think technology is something. Look, I think that I also find the mechanics of technology interesting. It is puzzle solving when you're installing Linux on a server and then kind of messing around with whatever app that you uh, uh, created or broke. Um, but I don't know that I have a lot of concerns about technology, and I don't know that I fetishize technology in ways that perhaps I did as a younger person. Look, my job, my role is as a technology reporter. It is to be a technology reporter, but I think that um, uh, I'm pretty skeptical of the role of technology. I think that one of the things that's maybe attractive about games like this is the you can use technology to facilitate things, but what you're really doing is interoperating with other humans.
That,
I don't
yeah,
know if that answers your question or
no,
just meanders around it.
no, not a problem. Not a problem at all, because I think just by talking it out back and forth, I think that we can maybe circle it and we can figure out what may be exactly what we're getting at here. But that's totally fine with me. Let me ask you this then. So when you're into those, if you're into those mechanics, is it safe to say that at that younger age, when you were kind of setting up games and things like that, were you the game master or were you predominantly a player at that point?
No, I think I've predominantly been a player. I would love to have the time to be a great game master, but I don't have the time. I don't think I have the desire. And I think with games, I distinctly put them into a bucket of um, this is something I'm doing for fun.
Hmm.
And I don't know, it would be lovely to have the bandwidth to be able to produce a campaign. I don't have that bandwidth.
It
I
takes it takes a lot of effort, doesn't it? Like, and it's really
it
true.
does, and I respect it, the skill.
Yes, yes, and I can imagine that, of course, if you are predominantly focused in on your profession, and I would imagine that as a reporter, you really don't have a lot. Maybe I'm wrong here. Do you have a lot of personal time, or are you just always working? Are you always kind of on and trying to think of ideas and like get stuff done and write a sentence here or there or change something here? Like,
I want to say no, but yeah, definitely. I mean, it's look, I like probably all of my colleagues. I feel very fortunate and privileged to do what I do. It's a vocation. Um, it is not perpetually being one, but it is. It's like everything. You have to be, as a teacher, you have to be familiar with not just uh, the subjects that you teach, but the
mm-hmm.
dynamics, the fluid dynamics of your
Right,
classroom, right?
right.
It's the same thing. And like, look, you can end the day, leave the classroom. I mean, in a pre-COVID era, you can leave the classroom, but you're never really leaving the classroom, are
Mm-hmm.
you? It's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing as being a reporter. Yeah, of course, like everyone, I get time off and downtime, but I'm also perpetually thinking about story sources, ideas, uh, competition, uh, my lighting, geez, Louise. Um, you know, did I
So,
shave today? Do I have coffee on my teeth?
you,
Do I actually know what I'm talking about? Am I prepared? And
you know
it's like
what's
everybody.
funny? That is like me, because ladies and gentlemen, and you, Dan, I will confess something. So earlier on today, I'm thinking, okay, I have to do a YouTube stream here, and I look at myself in the mirror, and I thought, oh, I haven't shaved since Sunday. Now, is it okay for me to come on the show because I'm just streaming live? But on the other hand, I'm thinking I'm meeting a respectable person. I've got to like I think I've got to
Hardly.
like take some time out here and shave and make sure, and then oh wait a minute, I cut myself. Can it be seen? Like I kind of know a little bit about what you're saying, but I have a funny feeling I only suffer from a fraction of maybe the problems associated with it because I have a fraction of the viewers. Um, so tell me then, Dan, what was the path that led you down the route to become the reporter you are today? And I know that's a long question, but can you hit a few of the major beats? How did you end up where you are?
Um, well, I think, you know, tying back to the phenomena you're describing about yourself, look, all of us have imposter syndrome. Even the best, most prestigious people in the world have imposter syndrome too. I mean, many of them do. So look, the path I took is unique to me, but it doesn't mean that it's better or worse than yours or anyone else's. And I think that the lessons I'm trying to learn as a human and as a reporter are to stay as open and curious as possible, so that you continue evolving and moving down a whatever metaphorical road you're moving down in a positive direction. So, I mean, the beats that got me here were, look, I went to college. In the Black Hills of South Dakota. I couldn't afford my first choice school, but I'm glad I did. I studied with this crazy old, I shouldn't say crazy, this former rock and roll DJ named Dave Diamond, who was from the mid 50s to the mid 70s in LA and San Francisco. He was a rock and roll DJ when the internet, when rock and roll radio was like the internet now. It was the thing.
Right.
And, he toured with the Beatles and played the first Doors songs on the radio. The lessons he really taught me were that take risks, but take calculated risks, and don't do stupid things, but don't let people tell you what you can't do. He had these little things, these little axioms he would hand out, and we'd maybe drink a whiskey and smoke a joint late into the night and plan out radio shows. And he would have these little diamonds laws to live by. And it was really, they're very simple cliches, but it was like, be a good person, do the right thing, but don't take no shit from fools, right? Very simple stuff. And he would borrow from culture and from books he read and kind of mix it together. But that helped me at least kind of, that mentorship helped me kind of at least navigate a career and figuring out who I was and what I wanted to do. I was lucky to work in radio in the early 2000s. I worked for a couple of record labels, and it kind of fell into podcasting in the mid 2000s. A friend of mine and I were doing a college radio show, and we were like, how can we we want to kind of take this show, do some production and really make this a show that we cared about. And we just by happenstance recorded it on a very early MP3 player, uploaded it to a server, used this crazy code called extensible markup language, XML, to put it into Winamp as an MP3 file. And every new episode we would update. And it turns out that was kind of proto podcasting.
Yeah.
And we fell into the podcasting community, which kind of propelled us through the early technology world into Twitter when it was in beta. And so a lot of the kind of tech and journalism worlds collided at that time. Again, I mean, it was just dumb luck. We were right place, right time.
But it's interesting that you say that, because I'm so sorry. What year did you say that was around?
We started doing this. Our first show was August 29th, 2004. We probably uploaded it the first week of September 2004.
I totally remember that. Not that exactly. I remember somewhere in the early 2000s being over at my friend's house, and I'm talking about maybe 2000, 2001, and he's trying to show me, and maybe it was a year or two before that, but he's trying to show me this new format. And he's like, Matt, you have to check this out. These are songs that are stored on a hard drive. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, it's an MP3, and somebody does this. Somebody just takes them from a CD and they do something called ripping it, and they put it on. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so, I mean, that must have been very much at the very, very beginning of all of that.
It wasn't the very beginning. Dave Weiner and Adam Curry, really it was Dave Weiner's code created the first RSS
Hmm.
that was designed to be make blog put enclosures within blogging markup language, and um, I mean, it really was just rich site summary, right? It was just enclosures saying with tags saying, you
Hmm.
know, here's an MP3 file, here's a video file, here's text file. And our first sites were, I mean, the site was coded in Flash, and then we would hand code a separate file for XML and then upload it. We didn't know any better. And then we discovered in early 2006 this crazy, maybe it was '05, this crazy beta software of WordPress, and
Hmm.
that was like life changing. It was PHP. It was a whole lamp stack. Um, so yeah, I mean that like I we were on Adam Curry's Pod Show network in 2006, and then he put
Wow.
us on satellite radio. We were from South Dakota, so we are like, oh my god, this is
Right. It's huge.
we're like huge, right, right, right. It was amazing. Um, there was like probably about 6 people and their dogs listening to us, but we thought we were awesome.
No, but what a great feeling because
Not
it's
that we were awesome, but it was the tech kind of
right.
what we were messing around with. We were pretty stoked with.
Right, like totally unstoppable. Like I remember that sort of feeling. I didn't obviously have that kind of experience, but like the idea of having this technology kind of at your fingertips and you could send something out
Yeah,
and there were others, you know,
for
because I grew
sure.
up like I think I'm a little older than you, and I mean you probably know. Obviously, you're better at this than I am. But I mean, I grew up with like using BBSs and like
Oh,
we
for
like
sure.
email at
Yeah,
BBSs was like from
yeah,
2 a.m. till 5 a.m. in the morning when they all
yep,
called each other and transferred messages and then you woke up to check your mail and like that was it. But I remember feeling that kind of power in my hands and just being blown away
yeah.
by what felt like something that was limitless. Um, do you think, can you tell me, how do you describe exactly what you do? This is something that I've kind of wondered about because I often feel like, and I apologize, I've already used the term a few times, but I say technology reporter, but I feel like you do something more than that. I mean, how would you describe exactly what you do when you look at these issues and these the technology and their usage and all of that? How would you describe what you do?
I'm a reporter and a producer, and a writer. I mean, that's what I do. The things that I do on a daily basis is I report, write, and produce. And generally, technology is a theme. It is so. I at CBS, it's cool because they let me do a broad range of topics. Um, I wrote about the iPhone, and we have a story coming about Windows 11 explainer. Pretty simple stuff, but it's fun consumer focused tech. But we've also all summer been trying to decrease the opacity in criminal ransomware gangs, and um, have been able to do some really cool stories and video segments and longer form video packages about some really interesting cybersecurity and disinformation. I mean, stuff that's like, it's nerdy and heady, but it's also a lot of fun to work on. Um, so it is, yeah, that's
I
the
for
day to
one,
day.
I think it doesn't sound nerdy at all, and I would just be in heaven if I were doing something like that. It would be so much fun, I think, to just sort of work on these things all day. I mean, I know that there's obviously the work side of it where it's probably not very much fun, but the idea of digging down deep on these things, I think would be really great. Like, I think it would be a lot of fun. Um, let me let me shift gears here a little bit and let's talk more about Dan Patterson's background. So I think this is something really worth getting to the roots of here. So that background, which we're actually seeing, we're getting a little glimpse of right now, um, Were you was this planned? Were you aware that you had like copies of Dungeons and Dragons, and it looks like you've got Numenera, Pathfinder, you've got a copy of there's maybe the 2600 like an omnibus back there or something, and I think Watchmen.
Oh,
Did you
that's
know that, or
yeah.
was this just something you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta go live in 5 minutes. I'll just do it here.
I mean, these are the books I own. I've moved a number of times, and over the years, have realized that the books I want to take with me are not the maybe mass market paperbacks I acquired when I was 22 or 23. So over time, that is to say, like I've primarily just whittled it down to uh, a lot of the books I care about, and those happen to have been some of the RPGs I've taken with me, and some are pretty new. I mean, I have been a pretty big fan. I have to give props to Dan Anderlich, who runs a really excellent podcast that I think. I mean, the entire Numenera community is pretty cool, but Dan's podcast is pretty great, and um, I, he has really turned me on to a number of the Numenera books. But I was really into the Monty Cook stuff aside, into we were Dan ran a campaign in D&D 4.0, and I became really interested in 5.0 and less interested in 4.0. So that development has been a lot of fun to watch, and I think that it's in a state that seems pretty scalable and sustainable.
So then you basically are just you have these things in your background. You're like, okay, these are the things that I take with me. It's interesting that they're the ones that you so you say you've moved a lot and you care about these things. And so I
Well, I mean,
mean,
I'm not young, so.
right. So does that mean then that are you a fairly now here's where we get to like the personal stuff. Are you a fairly frequent RPG player here, or is this something? I guess you're not a casual player. Is this a weekly habit or monthly habit, or what are we looking at?
Yeah, so I have, going back to an earlier part of our conversation. I really admire those who can be game masters and run campaigns. And we were monthly for, I want to say, 5 years or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Anderlich ran a campaign. His show is Explorers Wanted, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
to log roll the correct address. Um, um, but he is, and I think all of us, he has like scaled it up to a point where his current cast is badass. Like none of us, like, look, we're all old friends, but none of us have the talent that his current cast has. And they also have an understanding of the Numenera rules that, like, look, I'm just a novice, and so now we're not gaming at all, or we're not doing a regular game, but I think we're all fans of Dan's podcast.
That's awesome. And by the way, if you want, for those of you listening at home, what I'll do is I'll talk to Dan after the show, and I'll see if I can get a link to the show so that we can send you guys there to check it out. So then let me ask you this, and this is we just shifted gears, but now I kind of want to blend gears together here. How do you feel about the fact, like, is it weird when people are retweeting you because of your background? Like, as maybe if you can take off the personal hat for a moment, put on your reporting hat for a moment, how do you as a reporter react and feel about the fact that someone sees your background, they're like, oh my goodness, he's into these games, and then this gets kind of retweeted all over the place and kind of blows up a little bit, at least within the RPG community? Is this scary? Is this kind of funny? Is this something else?
First of all, I would like to applaud the uh, RPG community for their open source um, intelligence. So OSINT is, yeah. Uh,
Yes.
I mean, I should probably put a little more time and effort into my set. I mean, these are the books I own, so they are a component of my set, of my background, and because they are who I am. Um, Look, it's great and it's nice and it's flattering. What I really hope is that it just I, it's nice to meet people who are a little outside
Mm,
of my bubble,
mm.
and it's cool to meet people in a community that I wish I had more time to spend in.
Yeah, it was interesting for me, and I'll maybe my perspective on this is that okay, I had not heard of you before, but then when it starts circulating, I think about and I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of mildly amusing to me at first, but then I actually go and I start to check out your work. And to me, it kind of opens up a new window for me, and I start looking at what you're tweeting, what you're writing, and maybe what you're commenting on. And for me, what's interesting is that I feel like I get some sort of new information out of and a silly connection, really, just a silly connection, something in a background and something I never think about. But what's nice is I think it was a confirmation for a lot of people that felt like, maybe role-playing games and RPGs and tabletop was some nerdy thing that, okay, you do this, you're probably never going to be a successful CBS News reporter. And lo and behold, here comes someone to break that mold, and give everybody this feeling like, oh my goodness, he made it out. He's not stuck just talking RPGs. So you mentioned that you consider yourself more of a player. Um, can you tell me what sort of like feeling or maybe joy do you get out of playing an RPG? Like how do you see and what maybe makes for a good role-playing experience for you?
Well, going back to what you said a moment ago,
Mm,
I think I'm like a lot of people. We look for validators, but a ton of people play games, and a ton of people in the media play games. It's a pretty normal and fun hobby, and I think that to your question, it is that it's fun. It's 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 something that I can do that helps me connect with my friends, and is is something that is not maybe connected to uh, the larger pressing issues of the day. I can get pretty heady with this answer, but really, it's fun, right?
I don't no, I don't think so at all. I mean, I see what you're saying. It's a way to sort of like blow off some steam, get out there, do something, laugh. And I like the fact that you're
Right.
talking about connecting with your friends. Sometimes I look around the table and I'm just kind of amazed by the fact that I'm sitting here with four or five people and we're basically just making up a story.
Right.
Um, do you see any sort of parallels, say, between maybe the relationship between the game master and the player, and maybe the writer and the reader? Um, any sort of similarities there, or?
Yeah, I think there are definitely parallels there, but I think that um, a metaphor, or at least like it's more like a collaborative. Both are collaborative efforts. So I see, maybe if you're on a team of reporters, even a team of doing whatever, no matter what you do, you have to collaborate with people. And I think that that is what is so interesting about RPGs. It's not, it can be competitive, but it's more like a collaborative, like you said, Matt, storytelling experience. It is emergent gameplay at its finest. You are right. It's 3 to 7 of you, and maybe you have a framework or a structure of this rule set and the mechanics, but really it's just emergent gameplay because you're all telling a story together in a collaborative fashion. Um, Maybe it is analogous to a classroom, right? Yeah, you have a teacher and students, but you're not competing with each other, right?
Yeah,
You're
that's
collaborating and also learning from each other.
Yeah, that's part of it too, is through that collaboration, there's something that kind of grows, and sometimes it grows wildly. And I guess as a teacher, I feel a sense of responsibility to, like, even if it's growing wildly, maybe I try to allow it to grow in that direction, but I kind of have to guide it maybe in one direction or another in hopes of at least providing some sort of clarity or some sort of forward momentum to everyone. I don't know if you
Right.
feel that, like, as say a reporter, when you're writing your articles or you're writing a script for maybe a presentation or something you're going to do on air. Do you sort of see? I assume you're feeling that pressure as well, but does it feel like a little bit more pressure, say, because it's got to be something that's sort of right on the nose? It's got to be timed right. It's got to be like you've got to say the exact right thing. You've got to choose the exact right word. Do you feel a sense of pressure that way as a reporter?
Um, yes and no. I mean, I don't think you have to say or do the precise right thing because I don't know that there is a precise correct thing. But clarity is always the goal. And I mean, one really kind of refreshing thing about an interview like this is that I can kind of ramble and I don't have to think about, oh, I'm in a 5 minute TV segment
Right.
that I stretched to 7 minutes. I really got to wrap this up. It's nice. It's a real luxury, Matt, to be able to talk about these things with you and not have to have those guardrails on and to babble a little bit. So
Trust me,
thanks
there
for indulging me.
there are no
Um,
guardrails on this program, and if there is any place on the internet to ramble, it is here on my program. Please feel free.
I think, I mean, my job as a writer is precision, clarity, and I mean the best writing advice I ever got was from my dad, who said, "Write tight, hard stop." Right? I mean, like edit out, cut out all the words that don't need to be there. Um, and I still, if I sometimes wish I could edit some RPG books. Uh, I, but it's an entirely different type of writing, a different art form. Writing for RPGs and games and world building, storytelling. That's a different art form. Um, I see in my head my editor saying, just with red, cutting things.
I think
To tighten up.
I don't know if what you're saying is just with, say, your reporter's cap on, and I don't know if it's just because maybe RPGs kind of. I think as an English teacher, I often will read an RPG book. I'll read a setting, and I'm like, oh my goodness, you could have folded three or four words together, said the
Right.
same thing in a more direct way, and had more punch in there, and then given yourself three or four extra words, maybe here on column number two to describe such and such a little bit more. So I think to what's interesting to me is that if you're writing, say, a tight if you're writing tight, as your father said, I actually first of all I think that's excellent advice, and I think it should be true no matter whether you're writing an article, a tweet, or like War and Peace. I think if you're writing tight at any point, it's always better for maximum punch. I don't want to ask if there are any books that have offended you in that way, but are there any books that impress you at the other end? Like, is there anything like from D&D or any of the Monty Cook stuff, or is there anything that particularly stood out to you as like some pretty good writing?
Yeah, the Monty Cook stuff is great. I mean, it's also stuff where I read and I'm like, the, you, look, Matt, you were the English teacher, and really, it's you who I should refer to. But I think that there's a lot of superfluous copy in there. But at the same time, I really like reading it.
Yes,
Um,
I
the
agree.
D&D copy it's not bad, but it's not memorable. So I'm poking my way through a few of the new guides that I just bought, but I think that um, yeah, it's on me to be a little more accepting of copy where my internal editor probably should just shut up. Um, And right, just remember this is all fun.
Right. Yeah, it's all for fun. And actually I would agree with you. Like I don't want to I'll just say this. I love role playing, but there are many games out there that kind of just sort of do the same thing as a lot of other games, and they do it well. But what I enjoy about, say, Numenera, and I think I might have messaged you on it, I don't remember, but basically Numenera is one of I think it's pretty much my favorite setting, RPG setting of all time. And one of the things I love about it is that it's different. It adds something new and interesting kind of to something that used to be kind of had gotten a little bit tired to me. It adds like this kind of element that I hadn't really seen before. And I can just sit there and I'll read Discovery or Destiny or maybe the original book. Like I can just sit there and read it for an hour and it's not going anywhere because it's not like there's a beginning, middle, and end, but it does kind of transport me for an hour to some fun far off place.
Matt, do you bring the guides literally or um, as a component of your teaching? Do you bring these into the classroom?
I
How do
will.
you use gaming with your students?
So, one of the things that I do is it's a bit of a cliche, and you may have guessed by the themes of my program. I'm very much into the hero's journey, but it's not because I feel that the hero's journey is perfect. It's only because I feel that as human beings, there is something to the whole, you know, the structure of the acts.
Yeah.
So what I generally do is I start most of my I teach when I'm teaching fourth or fifth grade. I will generally start to teach the hero's journey. So I teach the different acts and the circle that we go through, Joseph Campbell's circle. And I start out with choose your own adventures. And choose your own adventure novels, for those of you maybe that haven't ever read one, they're basically narratives that are written in the second person, and they say you go to the underwater castle, and you can either take the gold. Or you can like run away and try to kill the goblin. Turn to page 15 for the gold or 20 for the goblin. So I'll teach something like that to show them to introduce the idea of branching narrative. Next, I will sort of introduce the idea of a commonly shared narrative, and I'll do a very general role-playing sort of unit where
Cool.
I won't tell them what I'm doing. I'll just say, okay, we're going to play a game, and you're going to roll a single die, and if the roll is high, you succeed. If it's low, you don't. And I'm going to tell you the story, and you tell me what you do. And then eventually I will actually introduce the material. So I will introduce Numenera, which is the big one that I often use in my classroom, to my kids. And for
So cool.
yeah, it's fun. Like I have to be a little careful because there is some sensitive stuff in there, but like some
Sure.
of the best feelings I've ever had were when like kids will come in with the Numenera, like they'll bring in like a book and they're like, I just picked up this hardcover book. It's the Numenera Bestiary, and I'm like, oh great,
Awesome.
that's exciting. My dad bought it for me. Oh great.
How old
Um,
are your students?
right now I'm teaching elementary school. However, I've taught this stuff up to
Yeah.
college level, and for a lot of people it's new. So I enjoy introducing this idea of the branching narrative, and the idea is, and I feel really bad because this is your interview and now I'm going off, but
No,
um,
no, this is really I mean, I think that this is a perfect application of gaming.
so what I'll generally do is I'm trying to teach them the idea of keeping multiple narrative balls in the air, because it's often seen as like, say, they'll call like social studies a soft skill, or English, even though English has grammar, so people will think of it more as a hard skill, but really the idea of telling a story is seen as a soft skill, when in fact there are like pieces to it that you can introduce, and it's as simple as a beginning, middle, and an end. You need to set up something, you need to show its change or transformation, and then you need to show the final payoff in the end. So kids at that age are just starting to
Yeah.
grasp this idea, and they don't quite get this. And so a role playing game, to me, Choose Your Own Adventure, to me, helps show them okay, there are beats and parts that I should look for. So emotionally, I might be like really nervous at the climax, and I don't know. But then I know that pretty soon something's going to happen to resolve the climax. So I'm essentially trying to teach those kind of tent poles that you see
Yeah.
in an adventure.
Fantastic. Your students are lucky to be in those classrooms with you.
Well, my mother tells me so. I don't know how true that is, but thank you so much for saying that. Um, so tell me then, when you're playing RPGs these days, are in the age of COVID, are you in a like a pod with anybody and playing in person, or are you playing by
No.
Zoom, or how's it going?
We have in Brooklyn, we have a great game store on Court Street, and it looks like there is a lot of fun happening there. I think that vaccines are required.
Hmm.
But no, I mean, my friends are kind of scattered to different parts of or at least my gaming friends scattered to different parts of the country. Um, and yeah, I mean, I live in New York City. It's a challenge. The pandemic's been a challenge.
Yeah, I haven't been. How is it? How long have you been there in New York? Can I ask? Or
Since 2007,
oh,
a
long
long time.
time. Yeah, good for you. I left New York around 2000. I think it was around. Wait, what was it? 90? No, wait, it must have been 99 or so. But like,
Good,
I
no,
have
good
not.
for you.
You think so, huh? I
No, no,
left New
no.
York for
It's the
LA.
greatest city in the world.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
geez,
agree.
Louise. I mean, look, I appreciate Los Angeles, but leave New York for Los Angeles.
It's so hard for me. I moved to LA and I tell you, I was so bitter for the first couple years. I was like, everyone here is so fake. No one has been angry with me. No one has told me off. And whenever I try to tell people off, they look at me funny and then they won't communicate or talk with me anymore. And I couldn't figure it out. And then I realized, oh yeah, it's the difference between New York and LA. You can at least be rude to someone and they'll be friendly with you, but in LA, you're nice to somebody and they'll treat you coldly. It's like really really weird. Um, but I digress. I'm so sorry. This is becoming the Matt Yancic show, and it's really not. It's really
Not at
not.
all. It's fascinating.
So
Los
Dan,
Angeles.
what are you playing right now, if anything, or are you kind of out of it for the moment while you're focused on your work?
I wish I had more time uh, for games. But I mean, I'm always playing something, um, and I mean, I feel like right now there is probably I'm more looking forward to futzing around with the Steam Deck when it comes out than I'm looking forward to any particular piece of software that is on it. Um, I think I'm also looking forward to spending as much time away from a device and reading. I mean, these are dense volumes, and I still have to get through most of Discovery. So I think like, through the fall and winter, I'm going to spend time doing that. Um, I yeah, I am envious of those who have more time to
Who have
play games.
the time to sort of kick back and enjoy. What's it how do you feel like it's really interesting to me that on the one hand you're so interested in the technological side of it and of course you had mentioned the rule sets and things like that. But playing a tabletop RPG seems rather analog to me. Is it are you in it for the communication with your friends and the socialization? What does a game with Dan Patterson look like? Are you like having some drinks and just like having a lot of laughs? Are you like seriously in character? Um, how do you play?
I'm not a big drinker, but yeah, I think the last couple of years our group yucked it up quite a bit, which was probably irritating for our GM, but also a lot of fun. I mean, we would share hilarious gifts as often as we would double down on tactical scenarios. Um, I I think that look, it's fun right now being a core component of like what we all wanted to get out of this. I think that it fit that goal. But I also, I mean, look, I think the writing of, the creation of, the mechanics of not just the stories but the games themselves, like that is particularly interesting. I've spent my entire career, I've been into the back end systems, whether it's a Linux and technology, and databases and servers, or the music business when I was a kid and didn't know what I was doing. Back-end systems and the creation process, I think, are always more interesting. So I think the creation, writing, and production of games is super interesting.
Had you ever thought about, and this might seem like the Bush Leagues compared to what you're doing now, but had you ever thought about maybe combining your interest with games with your reporting at all? I mean, it's kind of interesting the way that, to me, I feel like everybody and their brother has like a YouTube channel now, and it seems like every sort of person is sort of into like getting out there and voicing their opinion and whatnot. Had you ever thought about combining the two and maybe bringing, I would imagine, no offense to everybody else and maybe myself on YouTube, but maybe a more respectable kind of angle toward it, or
I don't know. Um, Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a lot of fun to write and produce games. I don't know the path to doing that. Yeah, yeah.
so then, can you tell me if throughout your life have there been, so we've been talking a lot about RPGs and about maybe your own writing and then reporting and all of that, but have there been any stories, maybe like in the form of books or movies or even just a news article or some sort of expose that's had a particular impact on you or been important in maybe helping form you as a person or you as a professional or
Um, yeah, certainly there are there's fiction and there's narratives that have been compelling and formative, um, and narrative nonfiction as well, and journalism. But I think it's hard to log roll or to say any one particular thing, and
Mhm,
I don't know that it matters all that much. I mean, I
mhm,
think that what is more important is, um than like what has been more important than what has been formative to me is kind of figuring out ways that I can transform those experiences into better storytelling in the future. I guess I do look back at the past, but
mhm.
I generally don't focus on it. It's so I'm sorry, that's a really particularly non-reflective answer for you, Matt. But
No, it's okay.
um,
No problem at all. Let
I
me
mean there are formative things in there. It's all a stew, but everybody has their like stew of influences. I'm trying really hard to just pay attention to what's in front of me.
No, I think that that's a really important thing too. And I like what you mentioned about trying not necessarily to look or focus backward. Like I think that sometimes we tend to do that and then that in a way steers us even though we're not looking at what we have before us right at that moment and we're making a decision or making a choice based on what we see right before us. So I think that's a great point. Um, do you see any relationship between, say, telling fictional stories through role-playing games and maybe telling your factual stories through reporting? Are there any places where they maybe intersect, or are they just totally different, maybe animals?
Well, emergent gameplay is a different animal from just storytelling, because you can add as much structure to the the game or the campaign as you want, but any GM knows that it's immediately going to change once you get started. I think that's different than fiction, which is different than what I do. But at the end of the day, the similarities between, and I would love the master fiction. I'm terrible at it, but it still relies on structure, and you have to master the structure, or at least try to master the structure. I think you were describing this and did a great job describing how you teach the 3-act structure. And I think, I don't have a 3-act format to my stories or to my writing, but it's very similar.
Hmm. In an interview you did with Julia Roy, you described something called a push and pull of an interview, which I assume we're in right now. And can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that, and how you maybe deal with that or use it to your advantage? It could be in an interview itself, or maybe even in real life when you're communicating with another person and you want to just figure out some information, or maybe even how it works and applies to RPGs.
Well, I think in an interview, depending on the type of interview you're doing and the time you have a dynamic where you're trying to extract not just information, but kind of meta information, the personality of your interview subject. And that ends up being context that's wrapped around the facts. I also have another goal, which is to make news or break news. And I want them to tell me something new or interesting that they haven't said before. I think that there may be similarities, but it might be something that's just a different mastery, a different skill.
So then I would imagine that when you're sort of writing and presenting news stories, like you need to sort of polish and hone things to a fine point, and you kind of alluded to this when you were talking about like when you read RPG books or whatever. Do you ever sort of feel like does it drive you kind of crazy when you're in an improvisational game and you're like, oh my goodness, I want to go back and rewrite that, or I should have said that with a little bit. If I had just deleted those 3 words, I could have said it in a tighter format. Um, do you ever sort of find yourself thinking that, or are you just really going with the flow? You're having
In
fun,
a
and
in a game, no,
yeah.
I've never thought that or felt that in a game.
Okay, good. All right.
In my job, all the time. Yeah. Do I look at something and say, geez, I really should have written that? I
Right. How do
used
you
7 words where I should have used 3. Yeah.
how do you explain the difference in, like, you have obviously a passion and an interest, I would assume, for what you're doing as a reporter with your writing, but then at the same time you have this unpolished side where you're playing games. Um, any way you can explain the difference there between those two, having this very polished form, but also at the same time loving this form where you're just sort of we're all making it up as we go along?
I mean, I think that it's they're just 2 different things, and 2 different challenges, and 2 different activities. Like it is great, just like an interview like this with this type of format. It's a lot of fun because there aren't the same constraints as a time limited interview. Um, it's the same thing in a game when you can hang out and have fun with your friends or even strangers and kind of learn the dynamic of the people that you're interacting with and the stories that you're telling. But no, I mean it's just the challenge of producing something that is supposed to be tight and well reported and researched it's a different skill, but it's the challenge is equally fun.
Well, in that same token, so you've just talked about, like, or you just mentioned the idea of some doing some deep research on something, and doing something that's, creating a piece that's well researched. You had mentioned in that same interview, I believe you'd called yourself a weird kind of introvert, and you'd credited that though as aiding you in your creative process. Um, I think I kind of know like what you mean by this, but can you explain what you mean by that? How is being a weird kind of introvert help you out with your creative process?
uh I got to be honest, that I don't remember the context in which
Oh,
I
okay, not a
used
problem.
that line. I mean, it was, but in an interview from a couple of years ago. But I think, look, I don't. probably 100% am a weird nerd who likes to play games. But I mean, look, I'm an introvert because uh, I can spend a lot of time thinking about things and probably spend a little too much time in my head. Definitely my producers, the last time I saw one of my producers, he was like, dude, you spend like 2.5 minutes justifying the reason that we're talking to you. Just shut up and do the segment. Like, okay,
But it's
fair
good
enough.
though.
I mean, look,
As an English teacher, I totally appreciate that. Like, because what often happens, and a problem I have with my students, and this is just a general for me anyways as a teacher, is that a lot of times I will say to a student, okay, you've just made a statement. Now you have to justify that. And they're like, but, and I'm like, no, you need to justify it. To me, the idea of doing that thinking is a tremendous like asset. And this is why I said I thought I kind of knew what you meant when you said it, but I was just interested in hearing your perspective. Um, I think maybe the teacher in me is happy to see someone that does this. I think that might be it. Um, so let me ask you this then. Until about like 10 or 15 years ago, so being a role player and playing tabletop role playing games and that sort of thing, it wasn't really something that people talked about in polite company. And yet here I have been for the last year making, just publicly admitting to it and just being happy about it, not worried at all. And you've agreed to come on the program and talk about it. It's exploded in the media and it's fueled, kind of mostly by like Twitter and YouTube and Twitch and all of that stuff. What do you think happened recently? Why is it suddenly okay and cool to be into role-playing games?
you might be better positioned to answer this than I am, but it's probably a number of different factors, right? I think that there are a lot of industries and a lot of subcultures that have parallel narratives to them. I mentioned comic books a while ago, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's an easy parallel
Mm.
culture, right? Comics were not cool for a very long time.
Mm.
Then they were hipster subculture, and then they are
Right.
mainstream culture. And I mean, look, I think that probably like everything, the internet has facilitated much of this because these subcultures are able to communicate with each other, grow and normalize behavior, and then realize, hey, look, we're not like nothing we're doing is honestly that nerdy.
Mm.
Like like we're just people who are into games and hanging out. It's the exact same thing as poker. Um, so I think that probably there's been so many different factors that have led to this normalization. But I'm glad. I mean,
Mm.
it really is something that I think is beneficial. And I think that like doing this particularly, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You must see this with your students all the time. But I think that gaming is something that probably helps young people solve problems and learn to all sorts of different life skills like conflict resolution, how to interact with each other at a young age. That's great. Um,
Yeah, you're
and
you're
for us
abs-
cranky old adults, it's like the fun stuff we get to do.
you're absolutely right. That is something that I see all the time, and it's literally role playing for young people to sort of learn how to navigate through these soft situations where like there's nothing but description for them to sort of go off of. Um, so like movies, film, and television, do you think that role playing can maybe and be a legit form of storytelling, or do you think it's just sort of like something people do on a lark on Friday nights, or can it have serious, like, meaningful and powerful, like, can it resonate in that way, or what do you think?
Yeah, it does, and you shouldn't have to worry about um, whether it's the same as movies or television. It's not the same, but it can have the same gravitas. It can have the same meaning, the same importance to you, uh, and the people around you, the people that are important to you. Um, Nothing has to validate or justify this to be important to you. Um, so yeah, it can be. It already is.
And let me ask you this then. like, and this is something that you might not, I'm not sure, but like most things these days, it seems that a lot of like politics, a lot of culture have kind of crept into the RPG world, and it's colored it in some ways that are not so fortunate, and maybe other ways that are great. Do you see this as like, and you see it a lot, and sometimes in online commentary among like RPG folks. Do you see this as like a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think maybe there should be a separation between something generally viewed as a hobby and then the world of politics and culture?
I don't know. I mean, you can probably tell me better than I can describe, or give you a good answer, a satisfying answer. I mean, tell me what you're referring to. I don't really know what politics in gaming means.
So a lot of times, it seems to me, and it's rather unfortunate, as the way that I see it, but there's a lot of pushback against, say, the more progressive players among role playing, and then maybe the ones that are seen a little bit more as to put it politely, maybe more old-fashioned. And there's kind of a pushback against a lot of change that you see in the role-playing world. So, for example, one of the things that a lot of gaming companies have been trying to do these days is be more representative of the people that play their games. And
That's
that
good.
yes, totally agree.
I
Totally
want
agree.
that.
Yeah. So it sounds like yeah, I think we're probably on the same page then. So
I
we've
don't see
seen
representation as politics, though.
yeah, I guess you're right.
if if I mean, if one elects to politicize it, that's fine, that's your own prerogative. But I mean, like, equality, diversity, treating human beings as human beings, like, that's not politics. It's just, I mean, I don't really know. I don't, definitely don't get down into the weeds of like virtue signaling versus trolling versus, I don't know, and I don't care. I am definitely not involved in any of those particular debates, but I mean, like, look, it's not politics to say representation is a good thing.
I love it. I love it. Um, let me sort of like shift then and kind of like ask you a few because I know that our time is kind of coming up here, and I want to get you safely off so that you can work on all of your more pressing issues. But I was just sort of wondering, has running, or I should say playing in RPGs, has it affected you at all, maybe as a reporter or as a writer? And maybe vice versa. Has being a writer and reporter affected you in the playing aspects for role-playing games at all? Has there been any kind of a relationship or something learned in one that you apply to the other?
I think maybe the stuff we all maybe already touched on. I mean, the analytical part of me, it looks at copy and looks at the mechanics and looks at gaming and says, oh, I want to learn to do this, or I want to learn to build this, I want to learn the systems. Um, and then I mean, the human part of me enjoys the experience of RPGs, but I think um, the lessons of the two together are really just kind of figuring out, I mean, figuring out the systems and how each game system works.
Cool. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the program. I very much appreciate it. I just want to let everybody know that I basically choose my guests based on the people that very much interest me. And I didn't know Dan at all until I sent him a message, and he was very kind to reply and to agree and be game to come on the show. And I very much appreciate his thoughts and his perspective on role playing. So Dan, I just wanted to say to you, thank you so much for taking time out of your incredible. Like I made jokes about it and made it seem like silly and all that, but of course you do a very serious job, and you've got some really cool stuff that you work with, and I'm very impressed by the things I've seen. So I've put links to some of Dan's stuff in the description, and I greatly recommend that you check out the things that he does. They're important things, they're interesting things, they're worthwhile things to read about and to learn about. And we can all be better, I think, off for reading his stuff. So, Dan, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the program.
Matt, thank you for not just the kind words, but for having me here. Like I said, it's a real treat to be able to talk about this, and um, it's cool to have discovered you and your show and your audience because they're all pretty cool.
Thanks so much, Dan. And for those of you watching at home, if you're interested in hearing from more people like Dan, please do maybe think about liking and subscribing, but maybe even more importantly, think a little bit about sharing. I do like to talk to somebody different every week or two. I like to get their perspective and thoughts on role playing, and not just the gaming part, but also the storytelling part, the professional part of it, and all the stuff I think that makes us better people. So to each and every one of you out there, thank you so much for watching, and everybody out there have a great game and stay safe. Role Player with 1,000 Faces will return in a week or two.